Developers don't understand how to turn difficulty into a genuine challenge. In fact, I'd argue that it can oftentimes ruin the gameplay experience. For example, playing through most of the Call of Duty games on Veteran is a slogfest. It's gotten slightly better with time, but generally speaking, you die in 2 to 3 shots, so you're forced to move through the arenas very slowly and deliberately from one piece of cover to the next. While it is difficult, it's not challenging. Well, I suppose it challenges your patience, but going through the game like this is antithetical to the fast-paced, arcadey playstyle the developers intended it to be played as. Call of Duty doesn't have enough mechanical foundation to make a harder difficulty work. You're probably thinking to yourself, why not just play through Call of Duty on regular difficulty first, beat it, and then go through it again on Veteran? And you know what? That's an excellent idea. But I really just don't want to play through a Call of Duty campaign twice. You know what else I didn't want to play twice was Halo Unlimited.
What?
Another game where playing on the toughest difficulty also kinda ruined it for me. On Legendary, you do die pretty quickly, so I found that the best course of action was to simply use the grappling hook to reach whatever high ground was nearby. And once I was up there, all I had to do was JFK the Covenant with a battle rifle. Now, something tells me that 343 really doesn't want me playing their game like this.
More of them, Chief.
Now, if the brutes had jetpacks like they did in Halo 3, 15 years back, alongside better AI, this could have been avoided, but hey. What does it matter? For the indoor sections, I found myself snoozing through hallways and arenas, just popping grunts, brutes, and jackals in the head without a second thought. As long as I took my time, I was able to get through most encounters without any issues. But due to the damage enemies were inflicting, I wasn't able to use a couple of the grappling hook abilities because doing so would make me more exposed than a homeless fella on the subway. While I suppose the amount of damage the enemies do to you does make the game difficult, it once again forces you to play the game in a way that is less fun. This is yet another test of patience. This slower playstyle I was forced to adopt turned the game into a standard, run-of-the-mill corridor shooter when it was designed to be more of a movement-based shooter. Speaking of movement shooters, Destiny 2 and games like it have the worst case of artificial difficulty, as Bungie's idea of making a story mission challenging is to turn every enemy into a bullet sponge that also does increased damage, while also hindering the player by removing the radar, rather than creating a gameplay sandbox with smart enemy AI that tries to outthink you, or pronounced enemy classes that force you to make on-the-spot decisions. And to be fair, to make any of that work, they would practically have to redesign the entire game. So what they did instead was, for harder activities, they introduced champions. Champions have various abilities like constantly regaining health or spawning a barrier that makes them invulnerable to everything. Everything except for a select few weapon classes depending on whatever mods are available for the season. Meaning you're essentially forced to use these mods, which also means that you're tied to certain weapon classes that you might not want to use in order to defeat the champions, which completely negates the promise of player expression that draws people to this game. Another element that brings people to Destiny is its power fantasy. In an attempt to bestow this fantasy to its user base, they make enemies in regular activities ridiculously easy to kill. While this can be fun, it gets old quick. Real quick. Quicker than I got out of the subway after seeing that homeless fella take his pants off. It's akin to having a God mode cheat code on, or in Allah mode, depending on where you're from. The ability to rinse through mobs of enemies with almost no effort in regular activities also negates the need to create a worthwhile PvE build for the majority of its content, once again hindering this idea of player expression, as Destiny 2 offers up hundreds of potential builds. I gotta hand it to Bungie though. Sitting down to play through Destiny 2 these days is a challenge in and of itself. It's about as tedious as going to the store.
Anything in particular you were looking for?
Oh no, I am obligated to tell anybody I see that I am sponsored by Current, which is the future of banking, as it takes place entirely on your mobile phone. and with a debit card. Did you know that Current has like a fee-free overdraft of $200? You can overdraft your account for $200 and you won't get any fees.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
That's not bad. Hey, did you know you could get your paycheck up to 2 days faster with direct deposit with Current? Current also has no minimum balance requirement. Do you see this? That Current launched a brand new feature called Interest with a 4% APY, which is 60 times the national average. 4% OMG, wow, cool.
I don't know what that is, dude, but...
Thanks for listening. You know what's pretty cool is Current is letting me give away $200, $100 to 2 separate people.
So who? Say again?
Just like 2 lucky people, Current will let me give $100 to them.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I gotta give a big thank you to Current for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check the description and click around. When implemented correctly, difficulty promotes, incentivizes, and encourages a game to be played at its best. I think a genuine challenge has been achieved when a game requires the player to utilize a majority of its mechanics in order to succeed, without making the enemies too spongy or hindering the player. Which is why I actually think that Doom Eternal has near pitch-perfect difficulty. In order to come out on top of any combat engagement on the harder difficulties, you need to utilize most of, if not all of the game's mechanics. Pole vaulting, double jumping, dashing, weapon cycling, chainsawing for ammo, weakening enemies to finish them and regain health. Success is achieved when the game is being played at its best rather than its worst. You're encouraged to become deeply familiar with the game's mechanics, but also be resourceful enough to know when to use what within a second's notice. Resident Evil 7 also did a fantastic job with its hardest difficulty. Ammo was more scarce, important items had been moved to different locations, and Jack could enter safe areas that he wasn't able to on easier difficulties, and that really put me on edge. I had no idea what to expect anymore, making my second playthrough feel as fresh as the first. These slight tweaks made the game feel tense again, which played into the survival horror aspect that the developers were going for. I loved that game. I must have played it for about 48 hours, and it was time well spent, but still. That's 2 days gone. A game whose idea of providing a challenge was turning off aim assist, which is probably the laziest form of difficulty inflation I've ever seen in the AAA space. All that really did was nudge me to upgrade this ability that significantly slows down time in the game. But I found this mechanic to be redundant, because I already felt as though time had slowed down significantly every time I started playing Days Gone. The lack of aim assist encouraged me to abuse an exploit that a handful of third-person shooters have, where you can shoot at enemies through walls so long as your crosshairs are on them, and they of course can't shoot back at you, ruining what could have been a perfectly mediocre experience. But on the other end of that spectrum, the hardest difficulty in The Last of Us is almost perfect. Ammo is incredibly scarce and the enemy AI is pretty damn stellar. These guys will flank you. If you're out of ammo, they will rush you, and they are ruthless. You will die over and over again. At times, it can seem miserable, crushing, and hopeless. But that only adds to the overall feeling of oppression and misery that The Last of Us wants the player to feel. Then there's Assassin's Creed, a game series that desperately needs a difficulty slider because the gameplay is far too easy, and the abilities you unlock throughout each entry in the series only serve to make the experience even more simplistic. And I actually find this to be the case with pretty much every Ubisoft game these days. They start out relatively easy and only get easier as you progress through the story. On the other end of that spectrum, we have a game called Undermine, a roguelite that is quite pleasant by all accounts. The game boils down to 3 basic mechanics: melee attacks, ranged attacks, and jumping, which can be used for traversal but also allows you to dodge. The melee combat is satisfying enough, although a bit simplistic. Ranged attacks have a small skill gap to them, and jumping feels fine. But once you reach the 3rd or 4th stage on your first few attempts, you hit this brick wall. Enemies suddenly have so much health and inflict so much damage that it can feel almost impossible to progress. You're practically forced to die. and in the process you lose everything you've collected on your run. Everything except for 1 or 2 currencies, which you then use to purchase upgrades like doing more damage or having more health, until eventually the stage you were killed on multiple times over becomes shockingly simplistic. Almost every roguelite game does this, and I hate it, because I didn't improve as a player. Instead, I merely grew in power. They want you to grind out all these upgrades in between runs so that you get that sweet hit of dopamine that comes with progression. But that dopamine hit only serves to sacrifice the game's fun factor. And while upgrading your character can be satisfying, Undermine's 3 mechanics simply weren't built to keep people engaged for 20+ hours. This is not only true of Undermine, but of just about every single roguelite that I've played. You got Skull, the Hero Slayer, Dreamscaper, Rogue Legacy, and even Hades to an extent. Now, to be clear, the gameplay for Hades is far more skill-based than anything else I've talked about over the past few minutes. However, if I'm skilled enough to beat the game on 9 heat, I should get all the rewards that come with completing the game at 9 heat. But instead, I only get the reward for playing at 3 heat. If I want to get all the rewards up to 9 heat, I'd have to complete the game 6 more times on a lower difficulty, even though I'm more than ready to tackle a bigger challenge. And honestly, that just feels kind of insulting to my time. This is why I love Enter the Gungeon, because while there is luck involved, it's mostly skill-based. You don't need to get lucky with good drops to kill the dragon. If you are skilled, you will succeed. It values your time in that way, because as you're grinding for better weapons and items which do make the game easier, you're also increasing your skill level and improving as a player by figuring out which enemies to prioritize in combat and learning boss patterns. For example, if you defeat a boss without taking any damage, you get an extra heart, which permanently increases your health as well as your odds of beating the game. You are actively being rewarded for your skill, and that's exactly how it should be. The idea that developers can ruin their own games by not implementing difficulties thoughtfully enough is fascinating to me. The fact that Halo Infinite is pretty decent on heroic mode, but super boring on legendary is wild. It really makes you appreciate when a game gets its difficulty just right, like Cuphead, Shovel Knight, or anything FromSoft has made in the past decade. Through writing this video, I've learned that I should probably stop playing games on the hardest difficulty, because it can really sap a lot of fun out of them, and can really tarnish my experience with it. But the thing is, I can't stop. I'm addicted to the prestige. I love proving time and time again that I can tackle the toughest thing a game can throw at me with relative ease. Actually, you know what? No. Maybe developers should stop implementing difficulty modifiers that actively ruin their games. I mean, they put that hard mode in there because they intend for people to play it, yet they don't put much thought into how that difficulty might affect the gameplay experience. Tell me how you guys like this video down in the comments. I'm experimenting with shorter content so that I can work on bigger videos in the background. Make sure to go check out my video on VR chat. It's far and away my best work yet. But thanks for watching, everybody. Remember to hit like or whatever stupid stuff YouTube wants me to say. And of course, I gotta thank all my patrons. Each and every dollar I get from the Patreon goes right back into this channel. Now, if everything goes to plan, the next video I post should be a bit of a doozy. But if it's not the next video, it'll be the one after that. You'll know it when you see it. I'm very excited about it. Okay, well, now there's no more script, so what I gotta do now is stop recording.